Hello. Welcome
Hello.
welcome to the new episode of Let's Talk About, where today we're going to talk about the disability system. We're changing it up from content creation to a serious topic. Not that content creation can't be a serious topic. Let's clarify that. So, introduce yourself.
I am Amanda, KP, because the last name's real long and weird. I work in the disability field and have for 21 almost years. Um, I don't really know how to do anything else except wait tables and work at animal hospital. It's all I've ever done as an adult. So
That's it.
that's all for now. Depends on what you want to know.
Well, just introduce yourself. That's all I was. Y'all know me. I'm Snix. Same old, same old. So I have Pop Tart mess everywhere. Um, I forgot to clean up. So I lived through the disability system. I still kind of do. So that would be my experience with this. Amanda's experience will be different. As she says, she works in the system. So that way it's different point of views. If you're watching live right now, or if you're going to listen to on Spotify or watch on YouTube, if you have stories to share or anything, the comments are on for Spotify and YouTube. So you can share your stories and I will share it with Amanda if you got questions for her too, and stuff like that. So don't worry if you don't get a chance to do it live. You could talk whenever too.
All right. My experience will specifically be to our state.
We're
I have a
in,
little bit of knowledge outside just because I worked in one other state, but
yeah.
any
So
like your questions, I may not know if it's a different state.
yeah. So if general or if you're in Indiana, it's mostly going to be Indiana, but we can always help out, you know,
Hmm.
with ideas. Obviously, if it's in a different state, you're going to have to find the definite answers. But if you want an idea, we're here.
Definitely.
So you want to share your story of how you got into the system and all that stuff?
Sure. A college here in town and got a degree in theology, which is super great. I'm really great at trivia if it has to do with any kind of religion, but that's about it. And I had a friend who worked at a day program for adults who have developmental and intellectual disabilities, and it was more or less like, here, come work here while you're trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life. Um, and short version is 21 years later, almost, this is what I'm doing with my life. Um, I worked for a long time as a direct support professional in day programs and residential. So that was, there's a difference. There's group home and there's residential. So just with like either two or three people who all have disabilities who live together, and then they just need whatever kind of support that they personally need in their home. So I did that for, and then that kind of morphed into supported employment, which is probably my favorite thing in the whole wide world. It's where I really learned, um, like philosophically and ethically and morally, how this job should be done, or the main goal of working with people with disabilities in that particular mindset. Um, and for most of that 20, almost 1 years, I was a residential director. Um, so supported people that did the direct work in homes, which I also love, but that's a 24-hour gig. That's on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that was hours and hours and days, literally days, sometimes away from my children and my family. And when I had done that for, like 6 years, and I are you going to be home ever? And I just didn't want to keep doing that. So I kind of lucked into doing behavior services, which is what I do now. And that's been, um, let's see, 7 years. Um, yeah, 7, I think.
And do you want to tell everyone what's the difference between a group home and supported living, and what day program is and stuff like that? Like you want to describe for those
Yes.
people.
So those are different services that, for Indiana at least, that's services that are offered by the waiver. So that means that the waiver, which is funded by Indiana Medicaid, that funding goes to pay for services for direct staff, for upkeep of homes, all those kind of things for people to have support, paid support. So a group home that's um, a complete different situation than what I'm used to. I didn't do a whole lot of group homes, but that's a larger number of people who live in one home, and um, and that could be, I mean, it could be 6, it could be 9, it could be 5, it could be um, any number of people. Depends upon the agency. There's lots of different agencies that do that, and there's a little bit different um, rules that are involved sometimes. If you lived with 8 other people in one house, um, the rules in that house might be a little different. Like who takes a shower when, and
Yeah, I
if
lived
you get to
with
go places.
my group home was 7 other girls,
Right.
and trust me, it's what you expect in a house full of girls.
Yep. And it may be 6 other people that you don't get along with or you don't know.
Or you're all
Um,
or you're all of the same disability, so you guys don't get along because of
right.
it.
Right. Um, Residential is a little bit different. So that's smaller. It used to always be 2. For a long time, it was 2 people.
Is are we
Um,
talking about supported living or a different thing?
yeah, so supported living. So when I say residential, I usually mean supported living. Um, so supported living is a fewer number of people, and it doesn't necessarily mean fewer rules, but just or different rules in a for the agency, but it's just fewer people. So there's logistically fewer things that you might need to have. Um, in theory, those people are people that you have a little bit more say on who lives there. You get more choice on who lives with you sometimes, depending upon the agency again. Um, Still staffed with paid staff. But for supported living, that could mean that you don't have staff 24 hours a day. It could be that you live in your own place by yourself. It kind of depends upon, there's different service levels, but supported living kind of covers all of that. So you either have group home or you have this kind of various models of supported living that could be you by yourself or with a couple of other people. Um, Sharing a more typical home like I live in, or like you might have grown up in. Um, Day programs are a little different. That is a um, facility, basically a community-based facility. Um, which that's one of the things I want to kind of talk about is when we say community-based. You'll usually see like this part of my eye twitch a little bit. The community facility where people can come during the day, so like Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 or whatever, um, where they can go into various parts of the community or do different types of things that they may not have access to otherwise. So it could be going to see a movie, it could be going to the library, it could be going to a baseball game, all with the purpose of meeting clients' goals. Everything in the waiver is based on what a client's goals are. And when we say goals, it makes it sound like I would also have similar goals. That's what ideally what you have happen. So it's not necessarily the same. Like I don't need um help organizing the day-to-day parts of my life. But somebody else might. But I need help because obviously the technical difficulties were my problem. Because I'm old.
Oh,
So it just
yeah,
depends
because
upon what your goals are.
yeah, you were cutting out, but it was like it made sense when you came back, so that's why I didn't say anything because it wasn't like we missed a lot or anything.
Mhm.
Obviously, if it was, I was gonna let you know.
Okay.
Well, we
Um,
tried the streaming together, and I guess her computer said no to the camera. So we're doing Discord. So definitely, it's gonna be weird with Discord. Um, so just letting y'all know. um, so yeah. So I don't think we should say how we know each other just because of reasons. But we know each other, obviously.
right. Right.
So I technically still live in a disability system, but I'm not like I started off like in a group home. Totally have war stories about that and everything. Like like group homes are good for some people, but they're not for everyone. They really are not. And a lot of people when they think of group homes, they think of like foster kids who had behavioral problems, so they got sent to a group home. And we like some of the group homes where I was at, they had that situation, but they were disabled. So like it worked, like it's still the same situation, but there's different types of group homes basically. There's disabled adults and
Right.
stuff like that. But I have a lot of war stories for that. We might get into that. um, I did supported living with like a roommate stuff. I have war stories about that too. She knows it. um, so right now, my situation, I live at home, but I'm still under the system and everything as I'm trying to get back to supported living on my own. Because supported living doesn't necessarily mean you have a roommate either. It just means you have that support system that comes in, like staffing and everything like that, which is my goal. Is because I only had one good roommate all my life, and they can't move down here. They're north in Indiana, so or I would just moved in with them, because they were my roommate in the group home, and that was like it worked out when we were roommates then. So, but you got anything else to say, or
I think like one thing that I always try to like point out is like when a person who has a disability needs support, like when me personally, but a lot of us that do this kind of job, when we say that a person that we provide support to a person who has a disability, um, it's not sometimes it's real physical kind of support. It might be um, bathing and changing clothes and things like that, but it's not always. Um, so, one thing that I always have tried to keep in mind is that everybody needs support to live a life. Um, Everybody needs support in one way or the other. It's just everybody's support looks different. So, while I don't need support to get in my car and drive to work, someone else might. So it's just that I fortunately get to make a living out of.
I sorry, I don't know what to say. We gotta keep talking. I know, so no dead air and everything.
Yeah. There's
That's
like a little bit of a delay. So like I can't tell if you're talking or not.
Yeah, because I don't have my camera on for Discord. I only have it on for Twitch, so she can't see me or anything like that.
So like one big thing, just kind of going into more like what I do. One thing I was taught early on is the probably the most important thing. My very first boss in this field is now my best friend. She, I don't want to say broke me up, have the mindset that I was fixing broken people, because that's historically what we have envisioned, what we've thought of people who have a disability or even like mental health kind of issues. They were broken and literally put away somewhere else, away from the rest of us. And she was adamant that I not have that kind of mindset. Some providers do, some states do, some individuals who are paid to provide support do. But that was the one thing that, like, I didn't come with that kind of mindset, but she made absolutely sure that none of us had the mindset that we're fixing. I'm not fixing anybody. I'm not fixing anything, because I don't work with broken people. That's not how this works. But society, like generalizing, often thinks of the people that I've worked with, and that is absolutely not the case. And that is a very big deal to me, and that is always what I try to do, and keep in mind that other people still think that, and other people still make the people I support, they still make them feel that way sometimes. So she always taught us that our job is not to fix clients, but sometimes we have to fix the rest of the world around them, and fix the mindsets of people who don't have experience being around people with disabilities, or don't have, um, who just aren't nice. I mean, sometimes people just aren't nice. I'm pretty sure that's kind of a thing in the world that we know. Um, but like me, I went to a private school. We didn't have, I didn't have, I'm old, so we didn't have, I probably had people with disabilities in my life. We just didn't have the diagnoses back then that we understand now. Um, so I did not live, I didn't go to a public school where there would be people with an IEP, or people who were in a contained classroom or a resource classroom. I had no idea what that meant. So I didn't have the mindset of people are broken, because my upbringing, my mother primarily, but also because I didn't see it. I didn't see it all the time. So some people do, and they don't know to have a different mindset. So my job has always, first and foremost, been to fix the outside, fix the society, and show people how to interact with people of all kinds, people with all kinds of um, differences. You can racial or faith or whatever it is, but my job is to help people interact with people that are different from what you might be. Um, I have been very fortunate to, I could literally talk for days. This might be a whole separate
We might have to do a part.
episode.
We might have to do a part two in the future.
Yeah. Um, I have been very fortunate enough to be trained by, especially with supported employment. I did supported employment in Kentucky. And Kentucky was one of the first state waiver systems that even said someone with a disability can work. Um, it was not thought of before, or people work what we now call a sheltered workshop, where they do piecework and they make so many cents per piece.
Which is still
That's
bullshit in my
and
opinion.
it's legal.
It
It,
shouldn't
it is
be.
a thing.
I feel like
Yeah.
they should get minimum wage still.
And there are some agencies I know in Indiana. There are some agencies that they do pay minimum wage. And they a lot of like around here for some reason there's a lot of agencies that do screen printing, which is really kind of it's not real easy. It's not as simple as what you might think it is, but when they started doing those, they were able to pay minimum wage. But paying somebody sub minimum wage that has a disability is perfectly legal in Indiana.
Well, I
Um,
understand because they're worried about Social Security and stuff like that. I worked at a minimum wage job, even more, paid more, and I still have my Social Security stuff. So there's no excuse as to why they couldn't get minimum wage. They can still keep their
yeah.
disability and everything with minimum wage.
Well, and so like the people that I've been so fortunate to work with and be trained by and work for and have worked for me, the problem that personally I have, and a lot of people have who do this kind of job, is that the best a person with a disability can do is working in a workshop with only people with disabilities isn't the best. um that isn't the mindset. Was kind of, we had institutions. People were literally put into an institution away on purpose, away from the rest of society, up on a hill, kind of out in the country, and caught on to, oh, this is not right. This doesn't sound right. Um, they started making all these changes. So we got things like group homes and things like that. We went from institutionalizing people to putting people in the community. Um, that was a great move, but kind of the running motto of a lot of us, a lot of people I personally know, a lot of my colleagues, is that if it's not good enough for me, it is not good enough for them. Um, I'm not working in a no air conditioned workshop with 100 other people who other people think look and act exactly like me, making 3 cents a piece. That's not good enough for me. That's not good enough for my children. That's not good enough for my family. And it's not good enough for the people that I work with. Um, Also, because be better. Um, there are ways to take what a person wants to do and can do and modify that, or negotiate terms with an employer to make that a possibility to help someone with the ways that they need help and they can still do that job. We can do it. Lots of other states do it. Indiana does it in a lot of ways, but it is possible. But it's not the norm. It's not what everybody leans on. What they lean on is go to a shelter workshop. Um, and that's my mindset is just completely different. So, like, one thing you'll hear us a lot of times, um, I mean, I say it too, and it's when I correct myself or tell you what I'm about to say, it's going to sound like, well, why would you say that too? One big thing you will hear us say is that people with disabilities need to be in the community, or we need to give them access to the community. Um, so my problem, my issue with that is that the community is not a destination. It's not a trip to Disney. It's not a once in a lifetime or every once in a while I get to venture out into the community. Me, as a person who does not have a disability, I don't say, I'm going to go work my community job, or I'm going to go out into the community today. I say, I'm going to go to work, or I'm going to go see my sister, or I'm going to go hang out with my mom, or I'm going to go pet some dogs. I don't have to say, I'm going to go do that in the community, because it's just understood that I'm going to do that. But for people with a disability, it's not. So we will often say things like, I support this person in the community, which I do. At the end of the day, that's kind of what all of the people who are service providers for the waiver, ultimately, that's what we're doing. However, it's not like a Christmas gift. You get to go to the community today. But that's how it's represented sometimes, a lot of times. Um, and it is, I don't know. I mean, maybe you answer it. If it were me on the receiving end of that, if somebody was saying, "Well, she's going into the community today," I would be real fed up with it real quick. It just doesn't make sense to me why I don't say, "I'm going to go to the community and see my mom today,"
I don't
when
think
someone
I
else
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that.
really,
Yeah. I just
even
hear
like service providers.
no, I just hear them say, "Oh, are you gonna go to your mom's today? Or are you going to work today?" That's all I hear.
So that's a good thing because there there's a there's an old kind of it's not really it's a theory technically. It's a like a more like a philosophy. It's it if you care to look it up, I'll share with you with it share it with you another day. But it's older and like in the 60s, 50s. It's kind of morphed into this, well, we don't want to do institutions because that's not fair and they're dangerous. They're outright dangerous. Like people died being in these institutions. Um, so we went from that to we just kept gradually getting to where like utopia. One day we won't have those kind of things because people will just be in the world like the rest of us. Um, so that is a um that's been a thing for a long time that a lot of providers and waiver systems are pushing for. And I know in Indiana, that is a very big thing that I mean, even as much as like, I don't want to say like controlling our language, but like changing the language that we use, um, changing how we communicate to and about, even like literally diagnoses. Like MR used to be a diagnosis, and I'm not going to say it because I hate it. That was a
it's
legal.
it's such an old school saying anyway.
It is, but that was a medical diagnosis.
I
Um,
knew people who still had that diagnosis because they never gone to get re-diagnosed to where they get the proper term. So their
right.
files always will say the
Yep.
R word.
Yep. And that is now more. I don't hear it I mean, near as often, but that's kind of derogatory. That's a word somebody uses to speak in a derogatory way about a person who has a disability. But it was a diagnosis. And that's happened many times. Idiot was a diagnosis. That was a medical term. So even like Indiana, it's been a long time. They have even changed like the words we use. They think are appropriate publicly so that other people learn that those are more appropriate words. So then we all know that could change. We all know they may say, well, this is um, a word that is more appropriate. But I will tell you that every time, the most important thing in this field is anytime there's been a change from coming from an institution to the steps that we've gone through or words we use or the waiver in general is always because of a parent and somebody advocating for themselves every time. It's not because of me. It's not because people providing services are like, oh, this isn't right. Not that we don't say that, but it is always because a parent has stood up for their child. And that is foundationally the most important thing we do, is to help our people have a voice. And it's not helping our people have a voice, because that voice is there. I will promise you that voice is there. However, my job is to get other people to hear that voice.
I've been
It's a little
told
passionate. I'm a little
I've
passionate.
I've been told I'm self advocating, and I'm like, sometimes you can't even self advocate because no one will listen unless it's someone who's not disabled speaking. Literally,
Yep.
my mother had to become my power of attorney just so the company I was last at would listen to me. So
Yep.
she basically had to repeat me in order for them to hear me.
Yep. That happens all the time. All the time.
And they're always like, you need to self advocate for yourself. You don't listen when I do.
Yeah. You do. You don't have a problem. That kind of what always is odd to me. I'm not saying never, because yes, some people generally, whether they have a disability or not, a disability or not, have a hard time speaking up for themselves. But nobody comes to me and says, "Well, you need to learn how to be a self advocate." No one says that to me because I don't have a disability, or I'm not whatever difference. So I'm not saying people don't say that generally, but me personally, nobody has ever said to me, "Well, you need to learn that. Like, that's a skill you need to learn." It's very, it kind of blows my mind that the expectation is, like, society's expectation is different in similar ways to, um it's like privilege. Like, you and I have the same access to the same things in life that we want. If we both wanted the same, both wanted world peace, if we both wanted to be the person who brings about world peace, we both have the same access to that. It's there, we can have it. However, I do not have hurdles that you do. So I have that's privilege. I have a privilege of not having to jump through the same things that you do. You're a step behind, just by nature of the way society is set up. And that's a problem. That's a problem for me personally. And that is a big part of why I do this job.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what to say next. I really should be planning out these, like, what to say and everything, but I'm not good at planning.
It's okay. I did. I planned them ahead.
She was like, I'm ready. She kind of already said that.
Planner.
We saw each other a couple hours ago. She was like, I'm ready.
One one thing that I always try to, like, if people ask me, like, I go back to my high school, not every year, but I purposefully go back when I have like a cousin or like my nephews there, just to embarrass them. It's super fun. Um our My high school has a, like, freshman, you can come and talk about your job and what you have to have your job, like what kind of education and things like that. And I always try to go as much as I can, because when I left high school in 1997, um,
I was
I
two.
was going to be, what?
I was two.
Thanks. Um, I was going to be a veterinarian, like every other 80s girl. Um, I I started out with all the biology classes and all the things. Your girl can't balance chemical equations still. Um, Now I don't even know that you have to. Like, I'm sure they have some kind of program or something, but like pre-internet and cell phones, we didn't have all that fancy stuff. We didn't have an app for that. Um, so I had to change my plan, which, like, a private school. Um, Never had I heard of anybody in the world doing this kind of job ever, ever. Literally, it was because I had a friend who worked at a day program. That's the only way I knew that this was even a thing that people could do. My first boss told me that this is the hardest job I would ever love. And when I started, I was like, oh, I'll just do this for a couple of years. I'll go back to school. I'll figure out, I'll get a master's degree and go on about my life and do something else. And here I am. I don't want to do anything else. I don't even know how to do anything else. It's part of me. So when I go back and talk to these these kids, they're always freshmen. When I talk to them about this job, there's not a lot of ways to like make it fun. Like I always inevitably end up being like behind the firefighter who's brought the fire truck, and I'm like, okay, like, I'm going to talk to you about this job. Um, every time it's always something like that. Um, I did not, and I know they have more access. Um, they did not. They weren't equipped to have them, and I would argue that they're not as equipped as like a public school or um, something like that. Um, but I know these kids are um, more likely to have seen people with disabilities, or been to school with people, or have siblings that have a disability of some sort, just because it is so much more broad than what it used to be. Um, but I always explain why when I say I didn't really grow up with people with disabilities, I didn't know anybody who had a disability. And my mom, I don't know, probably 10 years ago, she was like, Amanda, yes, you do. And I was like, no, I don't. I didn't go to school. My grandpa. Um, and she's like, Amanda, your grandfather had a physical disability. Never one time did it physical disability and had to do anything differently. I was probably in first grade, maybe, when I realized that not everybody's grandfather had one arm. I thought everybody's grandpa did because mine did. He lost his arm in an accident when he was 18 years old, and that was in 1938, y'all. Like it was a long time ago. So there was like he got sued, he got fired. There was no union, there was no medical care. So he had a physical disability. Um, it never occurred to me until like an embarrassingly long time, like as way into adulthood. It never occurred to me that he had to learn how to do something differently than me. We would sit and watch him untie his shoes. He wore boots that had to be like the old school kind of lace, like the hooks, and you had to put the lace around them up his calf boot. And we would beg and beg and beg him to untie his shoes because that man could tie his shoes faster with one hand than I have ever seen a person with two hands tie a shoe. Um, and we would always just in amazement watch him tie his shoes, which sounds so simple, like, tying my shoes. Okay, I do that every day. But he always found a way. He found a way around um, doing things. So the way he tied his shoes so fast is because he licked his fingers. So the laces didn't slide between his fingers.
Oh, so that's what
He,
I need to do.
I
I
don't know.
I wear slip-ons. It's one of the things with autism is
Yep,
fine motor skill problems, and so tying shoes and
yep.
that is a problem. Actually, when I went to go, because when I did the group home, I had to go through certain things. They just wanted to make sure everything's covered, so I had to see OT, an occupational therapist,
Hmm.
and I was telling her about this shoe tie because she had to watch me try to tie my shoes. She says, actually, it's a connection between your brain to your fingers. It's like your brain doesn't realize you're holding onto the laces, which is why it's so hard for you to
Yep.
tie your shoes, which is so weird to hear. Like, just it's something
Hmm.
your brain just doesn't tell you. Hey, you're tying shoes right now. Like it's weird how the brain works, but
It is. That's why I have a master's degree in psychology. I had to have a master's degree to do my job. And it fascinates me how people's brains, how people learn things and how that people's brains operate, but how you figure out your way around it. Um, or like sometimes it's just literally logic. It's just different. Like never, he would do things that like it never would have occurred to me. Like he could not, nobody's going to hire a person with one arm. Back
that's discrimination.
then, but right. But in the 40s and 50s, nobody would. And my mom is from a really small, little bitty, tiny town. Um, and the only place that would hire him was the school, and he was a janitor for he owned his own coal hauling business. He started his own coal hauling business, and then when we didn't rely on coal anymore, he kind of was out of a job. So the school hired him, and he did, like, he was a janitor and like maintenance, like he did all the things school that needed to be fixed or repaired or cleaned or all that kind of stuff. He did all of it. Um, the only thing he could not do without someone physically helping him was buff the floor. He had to buff the floor every day. So my mom and my aunt every day. The school was on the top of a hill, and then their house was on the bottom of go up the hill and sit on the buffer. And that is how he buffed the floor every single day, because his brain said, I don't need somebody else to do it. I can't, if I don't do it, I can get fired. Okay, well, I'm just going to have my kids sit on it. So that's what they did every single day. They went and sat on the buffer. Um, the the part of my brain that says I don't know someone with a disability, or I didn't know someone with a disability prior to doing this kind of job, is because I never saw him that way. That was not a word, especially back then. I mean, I would argue that it wasn't a word we used often. It wasn't a word you heard. You didn't see people with disabilities very rarely in like media, movies, TV, things like that, entertainment. But it wasn't like, oh, my grandfather was disabled. And that he was my grandpa, and he did all the things that he needed to do, and then some. He raised 11 children pretty much by himself. Um, Good chunk of them by himself. Um, Back in the day, my grandmother died when my mother was very little. So in a lot of ways, that's why I do things the way I do, and I do this job. Do you mean to say what my job is now
If you want
or no?
to, that's up to you.
Okay. Um, so I am a uh, behavior consultant. Um, we go by many names: behavior therapist, behavior specialist, behaviorist, all the things. So if this job in particular in Indiana, because it's different, all the waivers have different requirements. The waiver sets the rules for what my job is, how I do it, and what I have to do it. So Indiana is way. Um, Other states say you have to have a therapy license, or you have to have what is called a BCBA license, like certified behavior analyst. Indiana does not require that, but places like Kentucky, for example, they do, depending upon the waiver. Kentucky has like 85 different waivers. They have really like six, I think, but they have a lot of different waivers where we have basically two. Um, So what I do is, so I'll tell you first what people think I do. So I do this job in a school and with people like either in their homes or the community or wherever jobs, wherever they might be. Most of the time, people assume that I have people who hit people and bite people and fight people. I mean, yes, sometimes that happens, but that is not, most of the time, that is not the case. Usually, what I get is what people think is someone is being bad, especially like in the school. It's always like, well, you work with bad kids. I do not work with bad kids. I do not work with bad people. That is not how that works. It is um, helping people with whatever the technical term is maladaptive behavior. Um, and I help them learn a skill to use a replacement behavior instead of that. So I'll use like myself as an example, obviously for like HIPAA reasons, but also because everyone, and if I've said this, I wish I had a dollar for every time I said it because I'd be loaded. Everybody has behaviors. Everyone. Behaviors can be good, they can be bad, they can be absolutely neutral. Every person has behaviors that could be changed or that might be changed or should be changed. So for me, for example, if you ever telling you that my behavior is when I get upset about something, first and foremost, I'm mad when I cry. I don't normally cry when I'm sad. If I'm crying, just walk away because I'm angry about something usually. But when something major, it's got to be pretty major. When something happens to me that upsets me, I shut down completely. The reason is because I have to process absolutely every single tiny thing that happened before, could have happened, did happen, happened yesterday, might happen tomorrow. I have to have it all processed and organized and put in little folders somewhere in here. Um, the problem is when I do that, I am absolutely silent. I say nothing. So then it looks like I'm mad at you. It may have absolutely nothing to do with you. It may have yes. It may have something simply to do with it's just too much. Sometimes that is too much for me. Or people being mean. It's like John Coffey and the Green Mile. Like people are just ugly. People are just being ugly to each other. And sometimes that's way too much for me. So sometimes it's literally that. It has nothing to do with anybody in my life. It just has to do with whatever is in my brain that's irritating me that day. And it's enough that it's just really made me mad. But I completely shut down. And then everybody's like, oh, she's mad at me. And then my husband's behavior is he goes through absolutely every tiny thing. And he's like, well, that's it. I did it. I did all the things. And this is the last straw. So both of us together, like we do a whole lot of like communicating and figuring out like my behavior is I don't say there's nothing, you didn't do anything. I just have to process this by myself with nobody around. I don't need anybody's help. I'll come talk to you later, but I just completely shut. What my replacement behavior would be is to communicate better to somebody about I'm not upset at you. Or even if I'm not ready to say this is what I'm upset about, just say like I'll talk to you about that when I am ready. But it's not about you. I just have to go through this whole process to get it in my brain the way it needs to be. Um, so that's an example of what it is. It could be um like a common example of a behavior is like eloping, like especially little kids who like run out of a classroom or run out of a school or run out of their home and they may not have the safety skills to know how to not get hurt or get taken or get lost or whatever. So my job would be a to teach them those safety skills so that they can be safe or find a way to safety or get help if they need to be safe, but also to figure out what it is that makes them elope, why they do it. So the function, are eloping almost always is escaping. They're getting away from some other situation. So my job is to teach running off. And if that thing that makes them do that can be avoided, then I help teach them how to avoid that. A lot of times things can't be avoided, which is the problem. I wish I could just take away the things that make everybody upset or not able to cope or make people cry. I want to take away all those things, but that's not reality. People have to um still deal with things that either sensory, like it's too much sensory wise, or it just makes them upset or makes them sad. That's still going to happen. I can't get rid of that forever. Um, but my job is to help people figure out what else they can do that is more, that is safer, that is healthier.
Uh,
That's kind of like the long-winded version of it.
You were talking about eloping from school and everything, and there was a story I found out today. This little boy was found in a pond, and I guess they said that he eloped it from school. Like he just ran out of school. It was last seen in the school playground, and then they found his body today.
Local?
No, I don't know where it's at,
Hmm.
but so obviously eloping is a very important thing to work on, so it doesn't turn into that basically.
Hmm.
And I don't know, I just thought of that, and I was like, but also wondering how they got out of school. That's a whole different thing. But
You would be surprised um, how quickly a child can escape. Um, Even things from, like, I mean, working in a school, like there's so, depending on the school, obviously, like some kids, some schools there's not very many, there's more students than others, but when you are one person and you have a room full of 30, um, that can be, that's a lot. It's very hard to keep track of where every kid is, what they're doing, what they're saying, who they're interacting with. If this one has hurt this one, if this one has slapped the other one, if this one is doing their homework, it's really, really difficult. But then when you add in the chaos um, of sometimes, I mean, sometimes some schools it's every single day. I mean, some schools it's all the time, but you know, sometimes there's just chaos, and it could be, this kid has pulled a fire alarm, or there's a fire drill today, or this kid doesn't want to go to PE, so they throw things at this kid. It's all, everybody simultaneously has a different issue. So it's not as hard as it's it is easier than you think for a child to um escape. So like for me, for like when I say someone is eloping or they're escaping, that could literally be their death. Like they won't sit in their desk.
I've done that when I was second grade. I was always hyper. Little did we know I have ADHD.
I will tell you that most children are not designed to sit in a desk for 7.5 hours a day. They're just not. I mean, children are not designed to do that. I would argue most people are not designed to sit in a place and focus on something for 7.5 hours. That's just not
Especially
how
if you're
brains work.
ADHD.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not, um I'm not saying it happens often, but it would not surprise me that happened.
I'm
I
pretty.
mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, my God, I'm not saying
The
that
only
it's okay, but
the only time I think I ever eloped when I was like 4 or 5, and it was my first day at daycare, and I wanted to go with my mom, so I tried to run to my mom. and then
Yeah.
the workers were obviously trying to grab me because I was a 5-year-old running off.
Yep.
I think that was like the only time I ever eloped, was like, because I wanted my mommy.
And that happens a lot. So then if you take that into just generally, you being a typical kid and wanting your mom, but if you add in, somebody, a child has just been taken from their parent by DCS, so they literally aren't seeing their mom, or they don't know where their mom is, like you add all these other things, of course that kid ran off,
Yeah,
it's so part of my job is, it's kind of like being a detective. I have to kind of figure out, chances are, especially, like you being a 5-year-old kid, you can't say necessarily this person smells funny or the light is on too bright. Like you may not be able to say that. All you know is run to my mom. So my job is to figure out what that is. What is making you want your mom, basically, or making you um
I think my
go to your mom.
situation was because it was a new place.
Right. Right. So on the surface, and I'm not saying like my brain is geared, because I've done this for so long. My brain is geared to figure out the why, because I can't, I can say, well, now don't run off to find your mom. Your mom's at work and you have to stay here. Okay, that does not mean anything to a 5-year-old kid. Like, don't lecture a 5-year-old child. That doesn't work, because they've long since not listened to you, first of all. But that doesn't make sense. So my brain is just geared to figure out why. And so maybe it's because it's a new place. Okay, then let that place not be new to you anymore. So a lot of times when I'm, especially at school, a lot of times when I'm at school, I may be doing things like that. Like literally, like walking somebody around a school. This is the art room, and this is where you do these things, and that because it looks like this, and this says this, and this room has, whatever the case may be. But it could literally just be things like, especially with little kids, like preschool, kindergarten, they've never been in a school before. They've never been in a school before. Sometimes they may not have been away from their parents for that any length of time. So all of a sudden they're in a new place that they've never been in. They're away from the people they love. They're in a room full of children that's loud and bright and has noises, and it's too much for me sometimes. Like I don't have a sensory disorder, but sometimes it's too much for me. And instead of just, the expectation is you sit at your desk, then you sit at this rug, and then you go do this, and you color this, and you know, recognize these letters. Yes, they need to do that because academically, like that's the point of a school. However, you can't do that if you're too worried about the light buzzing above your head,
Well,
or you've had a horrible do what?
when I worked at McDonald's, like sometimes when I was doing the fries, it would get too hot, and I
Yeah,
would not focus because it was too hot. Because obviously a fryer is going to be really hot,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so I would have to step away if there was no orders just to cool down. Like
Right.
this autism sensory is really crazy and everything. Like,
So then my job is to help McDonald's understand that, calm down. There's no order. She's just gonna walk away for a second and she'll go back. But to not say, no, you have to stand right there, because that's not gonna work. It's not gonna help you.
I'm not going to
Um,
work if I'm about to get into a bitchy mood and everything.
Same. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But for me, if I don't want to work today, let's just say I don't, I mean, who knows? It could be any reason. It could be because I just don't want to, or maybe I have a migraine. I can just call my boss and say, you know what, I need to take the day off. Okay, cool. Because I have PTO and I can, just call her. The world still turns when I'm not there. It's perfectly okay. But somebody who has a disability that the impact is that they might not be able to communicate as well, or they might not be able to communicate verbally at all, or might not be able to express that. It's it doesn't always come across as simple as, okay, I'm just gonna take the day off today. What you get is just an example, and I'm not like, it could be anywhere, but like just an example of like a sheltered workshop, or like if you're in a group home and this is the rule. Let's say you have a migraine today, or the lights are too noisy, or your roommates have picked the last four places you've gone out to eat and it's not your turn yet, and you're really tired of it not being your turn, and you really hate Taco Bell and you got to eat at Taco Bell again. Who knows? It could be any number of things. But the what the provider will say is you're being non-compliant. Um, which is that is also where you'll see my eye twitch. Because I'm non-compliant a minimum of one time a day. Compliant. Nobody writes it in a chart when I'm non-compliant. Nobody sends a note to my case manager. Nobody behavior tracks when I'm non-compliant. But people who live in this disability system, that's their life. That's their reality. When somebody should be saying, has anybody thought to ask why they're not doing that?
I've gotten non-compliance for saying, "Can I do it later?" Because I have to use the restroom.
That okay, yeah, that's more than an eye twitch. That's a
Like
yeah.
literally, I have to go like number two, so I might be a while, and I got a
Right.
non-compliance for it.
Which I would never have to tell someone in a job that. Like, that would never come up that I would need to say, well, I have to go to the restroom and it might take me a little bit, so I'll do that when I come back. I wouldn't be questioned most of the time. Me personally, for sure, but like I was in like factories and things like that. But if I walk to the bathroom, nobody's like, well, you're being non-compliant. They're just like, oh, she's going to the restroom. Cool. Like, I don't, the parts of this type of system that where the expectation is different for me than it is for somebody with a disability has never made sense to me. I don't understand why there's a different expectation for me without a disability than you with a disability. Makes no sense. So that is why I will do this job until the day I die, because I'm going to figure it out. Um, it just it doesn't make it doesn't make sense. It's a different hurdle that you have, that why on earth would anybody, no one else, unless you're in this kind of system, has ever been marked as non-compliant. Maybe school, but like as a adult, you're not marked as non-compliant. Okay. The world still goes on. It's not like there's no behavior intervention when I'm non-compliant. Sometimes people in my life are probably like, she's not doing it. But nobody, like, the world still goes on. It's not a, intervention because, or they have to call my behavior specialist because I'm not cleaning my bedroom, or I'm not mopping the floor today, or I didn't want to go to work today. Um, Especially like if I'm going to a job and I'm making 3 cents a piece, I don't want to go. I can tell you I don't want to go. So
Pay me more, and I'll go.
maybe the reason you don't want to go is because you make 3 cents a piece. But who knows? It could be because you don't like that Jim Bob next to you smells. I don't know, or wears a purple shirt. Like, who knows? But nobody asks the question. Nobody asks why. So my job is to figure out why. And then if it's because you don't like Jim Bob because he wears a purple shirt, okay, then you need to be next to somebody else. On the other end of that, I could tell the employer, okay, move her next to somebody else. He wears the same purple shirt every single day, and she doesn't like the shirt and it smells. So move her somewhere else. Longer term, I come around on the back end and help you be able to deal with somebody who has a purple shirt. But I can't fix you sitting next to the person you don't like because they wear a purple shirt, if you are constantly next to the person who has a purple shirt, if you are constantly overwhelmed because preschool is too busy and noisy and loud and there's all these kids, I can't help that kid when they're forced to stay in that situation and comply like everybody else. I can't, they're overwhelmed. I can't do that. If you are in a crowd of people and you don't like noises and bright lights, I can't help you in that situation. We've got to figure out a way to get you out of that situation. Then we can figure out how to make that happen or help you to figure out what like that. I don't like country music, so I don't go to places where they play country music. And that's perfectly okay because I don't live in a system that says, well, you have to go to a country music concert today because everybody else is.
Also, that's interesting you say you don't like country music because you go to Mark's feed store and they play country music.
I used to work there.
Well, they also, but last time I went there though, they played 80s music, so they changed it up some.
Yeah. Well, I used to work at Texas Roadhouse too, and that's literally all you get there. I don't
Country.
dislike country music. It just was what popped in my head. But like, but if your 8 other roommates are going to Taco Bell today, and it's their choice, guess where you're eating?
Here's the thing, in my group home, we didn't get to do things like that because the staff didn't want to deal with us.
Yeah. Then you got that. Yeah.
You're supposed to have at least one form of outing a week, whether
Okay. So I
whether
want you to
it's
say that again. I want you to say that again.
supposed to have at
You were.
least one outing a week.
Do you know how many outings a week I have?
None.
I don't count them as outings. I just go.
Well,
Like that's what bothers me. Like I don't keep track of how many outings I've
well,
had.
well, they're talking about like either we go to a movie or even if we go out to eat for lunch. We never did that a lot because the
Right.
staff would complain about it, and also they wanted to be on their phones the whole time anyway.
Right.
They
Oh
didn't
yeah. Oh absolutely.
they didn't want to deal with the clients that have choking hazards, so they rather deal with that at lunchtime at the house than they do out. So
Right. But just like the conversation in your life or the yeah, I mean just like the conversation or the activities in your life, never have I said, "Oh, I've only been somewhere twice this week, so I got to go somewhere else," or "Nobody's letting me go somewhere today, and that's not very fair." But you had to have that thought.
one
I
time,
want to live in
one
a world where you don't have that.
one time I was at work and the rest got to go to a Chinese restaurant for an outing, and because they had it late, we didn't eat dinner till like bedtime, and I was starving. They said, "Well, we went out to eat," and I'm like, "You guys went out to eat. I was at work."
So you get to starve.
Yeah, I had to
You don't
wait
get
to eat.
Chinese.
I had to wait for
You don't get
dinner.
Chinese.
Yeah,
Right.
because they
But
decided to
but
have a
no
late
one
lunch.
does that to me.
Because they decided to have a late lunch and they knew they had to pick me up. They could have waited
Right.
until they picked me up to go out to eat.
Right. But the problem, this is like I think it's just my mother made me this way. It's it's the things that are frustrating about the system, the waiver, the disability system, being a person who is paid to provide support to people in this world is fair, is what's fair. I don't think it's fair that I don't have to have on my radar, am I going to get to go somewhere today? Or is this going to be another week where staff don't want to do anything? So I don't get Chinese food or everyone else does, but me because I've been bad. I don't have to, that never has crossed my mind ever. And it's not fair that it has crossed yours. That's not fair to me.
Oh, we got
It,
snack time taken away if one person misbehaved.
no
And,
one has ever taken my snack time
and
away.
we're required by the state of Indiana to have snack time at med time.
Right. So like those kind, it's justice. The reason I do this job is because of justice. It bothers me that the world that we live in, that the world I live in is different than yours. It's not fair, and it's a justice thing. It's a fighting for I'm the Supergirl. I don't know. Like it bothers me that there's injustice
See,
between our two
the
worlds. We
one
shouldn't have two different worlds.
the one good thing about group home is the scheduling. I was able to get up at the same time every day because they told me
Yeah.
to, which helped me a lot. And I had a
Hmm.
schedule, but we were forced to go to day program, and it's like that's the only thing I would not want to do is go to day program every day if I didn't have to.
So if you don't want to go to day program today, right? If you don't want to go to day program today, and I don't want to go to work today, I just take a day off work. You're not compliant.
Yeah, you can't take
It's the
days
same
off
thing,
from day program unless you're sick
right?
or you have an appointment.
But it should be the same. If you don't want to go to day program, you don't go to day program. If I don't want to go to work, I cannot go to work.
Like we weren't allowed to
Yeah,
be on our own in the group home. There had to be at
right,
least one staffing,
right.
even if it's just one
And
person.
some people, I'm not saying some people don't need to have somebody with them all the time, because there are people who the impact of their disability is such that they do need someone with them, whether it's because they physically can't get somewhere, or they don't cognitively have the ability to be safe or say who they are or get help. Like, I understand that. I'm not saying just leave everybody for free for all. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is there's dignity in how you should be working with somebody who has a disability. You should be working with them in the way that they still have dignity in who they are. And that is not what happens at all. Even so much as, like, in this situation where you cognitively can't verbally communicate. Everyone can communicate, don't get me wrong, but you can't verbally say, hey, this is a real weird situation, it's really making me nervous, I really don't like it. You can't physically or cognitively say that, but you go to sleep tonight and you wake up in the morning and a stranger is undressing you and putting you in a shower and getting you out of the shower and dressing you again. Someone you've never met. Like that's not there's not dignity in that, and it's terrifying, I would imagine. If I went to sleep tonight next to my husband and I woke up and someone other man was there that I don't know, and they're like, it's okay. Brandon taught me how to handle you. Brandon taught me what to do. He taught me to make you breakfast the way you like it and make your coffee the way you like it. That's terrifying, but that's reality sometimes for people who live in the system, and that's not fair.
I didn't know if you wanted to wrap it up with a funny story or anything. Do you have a funny story from your times in the system? Like, let's make it lighthearted. You know what I
I
mean?
do.
Okay, go ahead.
I do. Let me give me like 2 seconds to process this without using names.
Yeah, because HIPAA.
Okay. Yeah. So this is there's another coworker involved who I adored, and he just passed away a few months ago. Um, I worked with a fella for years and years, who nobody else would work with because he's mean and he's bad. Nobody likes him. I loved him, still do, love him. He was a lot of like physical kind of behavior challenges, but he very stuck in the routine. And it was picked up at this time. I had to say these things. We got in the car. We went to this place. I mean, it was very, very, very rigid on his routine. And one day he said, I want to make tacos. So I was like, we're making tacos. Like, this is brand new. We are making tacos. So I took him to the grocery store. Nobody would ever do that because that's not in his routine. He's gonna act out. We went to the grocery store. We got our taco stuff. Um, your girl does not cook. Anybody who knows me knows that I do not cook. I'm terrible at it. My husband's a certified chef. Well, I married him, so I don't starve. Um, we went to get our taco stuff, and this is back in the day. I guess they're still the same because I don't cook. Um, the the facility, the day program, the fire alarms automatically rang to the fire department, which was like a block down the road. I caught the stove on fire. Um, because evidently you have to like raise the entire thing up and clean underneath it sometimes. And no one had ever done that in the entire like 12 years. This,
Well, I learned how to do that like 2 years ago, how to actually open up the, stove and
yeah.
everything.
Well, I learned that because there was a fire, literally caught on fire. Um, so I've got everything under control. There's no major problems. Like it was just smoke. I got it. I'm good. We're good. He's laughing. I mean, rolling on the ground. You got fire. He's carrying on. I mean, and I'd never heard him laugh like this. So of course I'm rolling because he's carrying on about how literally loudly about how I caught it on fire. Well, automatically rings to the fire department. So all these firefighters start, and I was trying. I got it. Okay, and he's going. She's got the whole building on fire. She got it on fire. And the whole time I'm going, I got it. It's everything's okay. There's no fire. It was just a little bit of smoke. When it was bad. But I was rolling, trying so hard, and my coworker had come in, and he just passed away, and he started working at the place we worked, and he worked there until he died. He started working there when I was 1 month old. And I'm 45. I'll be 46 soon, so he worked there for 45 years. Um, he is fantastic. Um, he is trying so hard to explain to them also, and finally, like, I'm getting this guy out of the way because he's carrying on about how she's gonna burn the whole place down. Um, but I mean, the firefighters were rolling. I'm rolling because I literally caught the stove on fire, and I worked there for like 5 years, and then I went to a different department and then came back. And I was not allowed to cook that entire time. Like they would not let me cook ever.
So, do you want to come over and cook someday?
No, you do not want that. I can make like five things. Like nobody's gonna starve around me, but
I mean, I barely could cook. I haven't caught anything on fire yet. Yet is the
well,
key word.
leave it to me. Open the top of your stove and clean it.
Well,
Evidently, that's okay.
we have an induction stove, so we don't have to worry about that. We just gotta wipe it down.
Yeah. So this was in,
The old
oh
school
gosh,
stuff. The old school
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
like the burner. Yeah, this was in like
My
I don't know,
last
probably
place had that.
2006.
My last place had that, so I would do
Yep.
it, and I would have it to where after I cleaned it, like sprayed it and stuff, had it like setting overnight, to do its thing and
Nice.
soak in the cleaning supplies.
Fancy, fancy.
So I think we're gonna wrap up here. Any last words?
Love your neighbor. All of your neighbors.
That's it.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and we filmed this live on Twitch first. So follow me on Twitch so you know when it's happening. Thanks for listening. See y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.